Hey guys, this is another video for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist. As we're driving along here, you might just want to keep an eye out for face masks coming past and around the place. People wearing face masks of different descriptions because it'll tie into the story a little bit later. So if you come to Japan during cold weather, you are bound to experience some of the things that we're just about to talk about. Probably one of the most common ones is that you will be asked, well, first of all, it will be suggested to you that you should avoid catching a cold. So it sort of becomes sort of like a take care type thing. So when you've been talking to somebody and you're about to walk away, quite commonly in cold weather they'll say, as you're about to leave, they'll say, okay, so, see you later, don't catch a cold. Right? And also when you first see somebody in cold weather, and of course there's also the conversation that you get, or the comments that you get in just about every other country, when it's cold weather. It doesn't matter what country you're in or what language you're speaking. Almost every country we do it, don't we, as polite conversation. If it's winter and it's cold, we say, oh, it's cold, isn't it? And if it's summer and it's hot, oh, it's hot, isn't it? It's just a polite conversation, isn't it? It's a common topic, sort of a neutral topic that we can talk about with each other without meaning much, so it's sort of polite conversation, isn't it? So, geez, it's hot, isn't it? Yes, it is. Gee, it's cold, isn't it? Yes, it is. So we get that, of course, in Japan as well. That's the same thing too. Oh, it's cold, isn't it? And same as in other countries, everyone sort of pretends like they're surprised. It's the middle of winter and it's cold, like it always is in the middle of winter. Oh, geez, isn't it cold? As if we're surprised for some strange reason. So that's universal, isn't it? We do that in every country. But there's this extra layer to it in Japan that you might not experience in other countries, and that's the questions about catching a cold, because it tends to be about you. Don't you catch a cold? There's another mask coming the other way. Another bunch of masks probably. Yeah, don't catch a cold. Don't catch a cold will be what they say when you're going away. And then when you actually see someone, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Have you caught a cold? Is quite common, particularly if you so much as sniff or anything at all. The question will come, have you caught a cold? And this is in person, and it's also in emails and letters as well. Recently, of course, emails are more common than letters, but the Japanese way to start an email or a letter is always with some sort of polite, neutral sort of thing first. So unlike in some cultures where emails and letters we get straight to the point, in Japanese culture usually there's some comment about the weather, but in winter there's usually some comment about catching a cold. So quite often you'll get an email that says, hello John, I hope you haven't caught a cold, or it might finish with, please don't catch a cold. So it's funny. One of the reasons that we're mentioning this in this video is because when you first come here, it can actually feel quite strange. After it happens about 10 times in a day, you start to wonder if you're looking sickly, because you run into people and they say, have you caught a cold? I hope you haven't caught a cold. And and you can start to wonder, am I looking unhealthy? Why is it I'm getting asked this question all day long? And it's just because it's just a polite conversation thing. So this part of this video is just a little bit of a heads up that, when you get the question, when you first see someone, in the morning, hello, and oh, I hope you haven't caught a cold, or when you get it at the end of the day, don't catch a cold, that you'll be aware that it's just a polite conversation thing like the weather is. And same as in emails and things like that. So no, I'm fine. And pass it off sort of thing. So it's just like how are you, but it's a winter version of how are you. So there's that. There is also an element of genuine concern about it, though. Japanese people are genuinely, this is all generalizations, but lots of Japanese people are genuinely worried about colds. Now, the mask thing, you've probably seen the masks already today, and we made a video about this once before now. The reasons that people here wear masks, there are a number of them. One of them is they worry about catching a cold, so they don't want to catch a cold. Another one is if they have a bit of a sniffle or a cold, sorry, Sorry, it seems I've caught a cold. I don't know where that came from. Isn't that funny? So, yeah, so one of the reasons that they wear a mask is because they genuinely don't want to catch a cold. Another reason is if they have a sniffle or a cough or a sneeze or anything like that going on, they wear it so that other people don't worry. And this is actually a point worth thinking about if you're going to be in Japan during cold weather, is what you don't want to be doing is having a nasty cough or some sort of disturbing health thing going on and not wear a mask, because it can make people feel really uncomfortable. Obviously, you know, if you're sort of coughing and hacking and it sounds like you're dying, and you know you're around other people on a train or a bus or in a room or in a restaurant or at work or wherever you happen to be, it's probably better to bite the bullet and wear a mask, because it'll make them really nervous, make them really uncomfortable. So that's the second reason. So they don't want to catch a cold, or if they've got a cold or a bit of a sniffle or the start of a cold or the end of a cold or whatever, they don't want to give it to someone else. Another one is that some Japanese people are of the opinion that if you have a cold, what tends to happen is that your throat and nose tend to dry out and get dry and uncomfortable, and that if you wear a mask, that it stops your throat from drying out and becoming uncomfortable. Which explains why what you'll have been noticing is a lot of these cars are coming past with one person in the car wearing a mask. And that's quite common too, that you'll see one person in a car alone wearing a mask, which means that the transfer of germs obviously isn't an issue at that particular time, but they're wearing it for what other reasons. So there's that reason as well. And there is one more reason, and it's a purely social one. That there are some people who wear a mask here because they're a shy person, or because, you know, I know a lady that once was wearing a mask, and I asked her straight out, why are you wearing your mask? Because it's sort of, the research goes into these videos, you know. It's not made up as we go along, despite what it seems. And there was actually a lady once whose answer was that she didn't have time to put makeup on. So she had to leave the house in a hurry, didn't have time to put makeup on, so she threw on a mask instead. And there are people here that wear masks for those sorts of reasons, that they're either shy or they're doing some job somewhere and they just wear a mask. There's people here working jobs where they just sort of do it as a matter of course, you know, in winter bus drivers and taxi drivers and you know, shop assistants and people like that will be wearing masks as well, which can actually be a bit annoying sometimes if you're trying to communicate with people that are wearing a mask, particularly if you're communicating in Japanese and, you know, you're not used to hearing Japanese perhaps, if you're just here for a short time and, you know, the person behind the counter says to you, can make it a little bit frustrating, but it happens. So there's the mask aspect. So what we can learn from that, or what we can be aware of for that, is that if we're in Japan and that we do have a bit of a cough or a cold or something like that, we might want to consider wearing a mask as well, just for the comfort of the people around us. It's best not to ask too about the mask thing. It's just best to accept it. The reason, sort of, we're pretty careful about who we ask. You know, it's usually family members and close friends and people like that we ask about these sorts of things, because you don't really want to be saying to someone, you know, why are you wearing a mask? It's not really a good thing to do. So, but we might want to consider wearing them ourselves. But there is definitely an obsession with the catch the cold thing. There is definitely an underlying feeling of genuine concern all the time about catching colds. Another thing too that we need to be aware of here is, we might have talked about this in a previous video, is blowing your nose in Japan is a real, like in public, is considered to be pretty rude, pretty disturbing, probably for the reasons we were just talking about. You know, it's sort of a sickly sort of thing to do, and it's sort of similar to farting in public, you know. So in some cultures, you know, if you sort of it's sort of similar, sorry, but it sort of is, you know. It's really a no-no. So what you really need to do if you need to blow your nose here is to get as far away from people as possible, maybe go into a bathroom or go somewhere else and blow your nose so that people don't hear it or see it, because it's sort of considered pretty disgusting, particularly as what often people from other cultures do is with tissues or hankies, you know, blow their nose into a handkerchief or a tissue and then put it in their pocket, which from a Japanese point of view is considered really disgusting, because you've just put, you know, a little package of snot into your pocket basically, which in this culture is just considered to be totally disgusting and horrible. So sadly, or something to keep in mind, is we have to do it really quietly, somewhere where people can't see us or hear us. And yeah, you don't want to be pulling out a hanky and blowing your nose and putting it away again. It's not really a good thing to do here. However, sniffing is okay, which is interesting. So people will sniff, you know, when they've got a cold, they'll sniff and they'll sniff and they'll sniff and they'll sniff. So, and that's considered to be acceptable here. So, but again, if you're going to be in public here and you're going to be sniffing a lot, then it's going to make people, if people are close to you, they're going to be feeling uncomfortable because they're thinking, wow, he's got a cold, I don't want to catch a cold. So there's another one. So yeah, consider wearing a mask if you're sick. Don't blow your nose where people are going to see it or hear it, because that's going to make people uncomfortable. And we just have to be sensitive about this, be aware of the fact that there is this major underlying concern all the time. Another funny one, this is not quite so common, but it does happen, is that when the weather's cool, that if you don't wear enough clothes to look warm, people will comment on it. And it's really interesting that a lot of other countries, you know, in winter here, sometimes if you get a warm day, if there's no wind and it's sunny, it might actually be quite nice and warm outside, you know, and so, you know, sometimes it's like, oh no, I can get away with just a shirt today, it's not so cold, I'm just going to the shop, or I'm just going down to that place. And if you run into somebody, they'll be saying, oh no, you're going to catch a cold, you're not wearing enough clothes, you're not wearing warm enough. And you can get this a lot. It can drive you nuts. It can drive you nuts. Why aren't you wearing a coat? Oh my goodness, you're going to catch a cold, you know. And it can drive you nuts. And it can actually get a person to the point where you will actually put on warmer clothes when you're going out, just so you don't have to put up with those comments all day. For real. For real, it happens. It happens because it can drive you crazy. It can really drive you crazy. Oh, it's quite a nice sunny day today, I'll just wear a shirt, you know. And then everywhere you go, anybody you talk to is saying, oh, you know, you're going to catch a cold. You're going to catch a cold. This big obsession with catching a cold, you know, which there's that. So there's all that. And then interestingly though, all these precautions that people take about, you know, this total sort of obsession almost with not catching a cold and don't catch a cold, and yet people here do seem to catch colds a lot. And there's actually, I remember there's a report once by a doctor at Tokyo University who said that he did research on this and compared Japanese people's allergies and vulnerabilities with catching colds and allergies and things like that. And his findings were that it was as a result of Japanese people's lives being so clean from when they were babies, so that their natural immunity systems weren't very strong, because from when they're babies they're kept in really super clean environments and not sort of exposed to germs, you know, hidden from germs and protected from germs. And I mean, you'll see babies here with masks on, and people, you know, people won't take their babies to, or their kids even, to places if other people have colds, and you know, whole events get cancelled if people have colds. Oh no, we can't go on Saturday because we've caught a cold. And this is the amazing thing, is that they do seem to catch colds a lot here, and the result of it seems to be really big. So people will quite commonly cancel things. You know, you'll have an arrangement to do something with some people, you know, okay, it's Saturday afternoon, let's do this, okay, and then you'll get an email on the Friday, oh look, sorry, you know, I can't do it because I've caught a cold. And sometimes it's because the person is so sick that they can't physically do whatever it is that they wanted to do, and other times it's just because they don't want to socialise with people when they have a cold, because they feel like they're diseased, you know, they feel like they're not clean, and they feel like it's going to make other people uncomfortable because they have a cold. So it's sort of interesting that there's this sort of obsession with not catching a cold, and yet people here seem really vulnerable to actually catching colds, and then when they do catch them, it does seem to really take them out of the game. So, to be honest, and you might be starting to feel this, it can be sort of frustrating. It can be sort of frustrating that you know, that there's this constant obsession with the cold thing, you know. and even though the polite conversation thing, you know, geez, don't catch a cold and that sort of thing, it's sort of, you know, that's not really a big thing, but it's constant. It's every day, this obsession with catching a cold. And you know, and quite often December, January in Japan, well, things often grind to a halt because of this cold thing, catching a cold. And catch a cold, I caught a cold, I can't come because I caught a cold, and let's don't, you know, and it's a real thing. So, and again, it's one of those things too that you can't really talk to Japanese people about it. You know, if you come here and you're here for a while and this thing starts to drive you crazy, you can't really talk to Japanese people about it because it will just make them feel uncomfortable, and they won't really get that. The problem with it is that the average Japanese person who hasn't lived in other cultures is so used to all this, and it's the same as all of us in our own countries. You know, in our own countries, whatever we do and however we do things just seems normal to us, you know. And if someone comes along and says that's sort of odd, you know, we don't sort of get it, and if anything, we're going to end up getting offended. And it's another one of those things. 99% of these things on the how-to playlist, the reason we're talking about it is to give you a heads up so that you're prepared if you do come and spend time in Japan, that you'll be prepared for these things. And also because you can't really talk about it to Japanese people, because they're going to feel uncomfortable about it or offended by it or whatever, and at the very least they won't sort of get it unless they've lived in other cultures and seen the way people in other cultures do things. You know, unless they've lived in Alaska and seen that, you know, it's different, or Canada, or you know, parts of Europe that are cold, or you know, unless they've lived in other countries and experienced the way other people live, they really won't understand what you're on about, and they really won't get your perspective on it. So it's better not to talk about it. It's better just to be aware of it and just accept it and expect it and know it's coming. Know it's coming. That if you come to Japan during cold weather, that you're going to hear this, you're going to see this. You know, the obsession with the cleanliness and the washing the hands with the antibacteria liquid that's everywhere, and the masks and everything else. It's going to be part of the deal, and the hearing about colds all day, every day, and it can get frustrating. It can get frustrating when things keep getting cancelled because someone's got a cold, and you know, and you keep getting asked if you've caught a cold, and it can start to drive you crazy after a while. So just have to accept that it's just part of the culture. It's just the way it is, and not let it bother you. And again, if you're sitting watching this in another country, sitting there in the comfort of your own bedroom watching this on your computer, it's probably going to seem petty and not important. But it's when you've been here for a whole winter and then you start to get why this can become a bit of an issue, because you're surrounded by it all the time, you know. And if you're sitting on the train blowing your nose into a hanky, people are going to move away, or they'll stop inviting you to places, and they'll stop hanging out with you if you start doing stuff like that. And so that's why these sorts of things are important. Again, you know, as with all these videos on our how-to playlist, you can do whatever you want in Japan. You know, people aren't going to say much to you. They're just going to let you do whatever you want. But these things are important if you want to get the most out of your experience here, because these things can have consequences. You know, either if you ask the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, like, what's this thing with colds, you know, or why are you wearing a mask, or if you don't wear a mask and you're sitting there blowing your nose into a hanky, or snorting and coughing and sounding like you're dying of something, people will avoid you, and they'll feel uncomfortable. It's possible, it's very possible that people will avoid you and not invite you to things and stay away from you because, you know, you don't know how to behave, basically. So anyway, everybody, please look after yourselves, and please don't catch a cold. Hopefully that was of use to somebody. More videos coming soon.